Everybody. So welcome back, everybody. Thanks for joining us for part 2 here. As I mentioned, this presentation is really meant to take you through maybe how to better apply some of these concepts. And again, there's no perfect way to do it, and we all have different charisms and gifts, and that's what's so wonderful in the church is that we are one body, and we have many parts doing many different things. But ultimately, if it's all focused towards glorifying God, it brings a lot of good to this world. So I'll just kind of take you through some of those topics here, and maybe some thoughts on where I could see this apply to your ministry and your parishes as well. So I'll start by just kind of, again, putting this in context, this idea that we as humans have 3 relationships, right? First and foremost is our relationship with God, the Creator. And that needs to be first in our lives, how we live our lives. And then from that needs to flow our relationship and how we interact and love one another, as well as how we interact with God's creation. And I think that's really important that, in Ignatian spirituality, St. Ignatius would talk about disordered attachments, that things become disordered, that if we don't have God first and foremost, then the people of this world and how we treat them, how we view them becomes disordered easily, and how we use goods in this world becomes disordered easily. So remember those 3 relationships. And I want to take you back from presentation 1. I mentioned St. Francis of Assisi, who obviously Pope Francis taking his name from him, and really having a heart for the poor and simplicity. What a great witness and challenge to all of us, how he lives that simplicity. And you might remember that when he was elected Pope, and some of those first things he did with choosing not to ride in the papal limousine and riding the bus and paying his own bill at the lobby, all those kind of acts that can be really challenging to us. But ultimately, mimicking St. Francis of Assisi. And I showed these 2 pictures here because often with youth, saints can be an amazing way to draw them to Christ, but we can also portray saints in ways that is not really accessible to people, right? That I could never be that. And the reality is, we know God is calling all of us to sainthood, to use the charisms and gifts we have, to use our personalities, whether it's our temper or our perseverance, all these things that we have that make us are there for a reason, and God can mold that. And St. Francis, what a beautiful example. Now on the left here, I show that classic kind of garden statue, St. Francis, who, honestly, for me, I think does such a disservice to St. Francis, right? To think of him writing the Canticle of Creation, right? Laudato Si, mi Signor, to him writing that Canticle of Creation, to think of him like prancing through a field, holding bunnies, I think really does a disservice to the depth of who St. Francis is, right? The first stigmatist, the wounds of Christ on his hands and feet. He had a love for God and a love for the poor in such a profound way, right? Giving away his possessions, or his father's possessions, and entering poverty. What a beautiful, heroic thing, right? And he didn't have it all figured out, but he trusted God. When the Canticle of Creation was written, St. Francis of Assisi was not prancing through a field, right? This is towards the end of his life. He has the stigmata. He's struggling with his health. He's partially blind. His lungs are filling with fluid. He's near death, and he talks about sister death. And I think just the realness of the struggle of some of those saints in their vices and in their temptations, and that they don't have it all figured out, can be a really great way for us to bring people into a deeper love for our faith, that we're all called to greater virtue, and we're all called to sainthood. Just a couple aspects here with God's good creation. This idea that we know God creates ex nihilo, out of nothing, from nothing, right? And because it's God's creation, it has intrinsic value that we need to take seriously, that we're not always going to have extrinsic or economic gain from it. That even though those things are good and we can utilize those in their right order, that ultimately there's an intrinsic side to creation that we need to respect, because we being creatures, just that very act of recognizing we are creatures entails that there is a creator and that we're not the creator, and we need to have respect for what we didn't create, and for the genius that is creation around us. And I'm going to take you through a favorite quote of mine. This isn't Aldo Leopold. This is G.K. Chesterton. So I'll read this for you and we'll reflect on it. It says, "Because children have abounding vitality, because they are in spirit fierce and free, therefore they want things repeated and unchanged. They always say, 'Do it again.' And the grown-up person does it again until he is nearly dead. For the grown-up people are not strong enough to exult in monotony. But perhaps God is strong enough to exult in monotony. It is possible that God says every morning, 'Do it again,' to the sun, and every evening, 'Do it again,' to the moon. It may not be automatic necessity that makes all daisies alike. It may be that God makes every daisy separately, but he's never gotten tired of making them. It may be that he has the eternal appetite of infancy, for we have sinned and we've grown old, and our Father is younger than we." What a beautiful little quote there from G.K. Chesterton, as only he can do with some of those things. This idea of creation, and that I think it's important for us to know creation wasn't just a thing, a time ago that creation happened. It's happening. God sustains us every day. It's an ever-present act of creation. God is intimately involved in creation every moment of every day. And I think that really helps frame, as Catholics, our understanding of creation, that it's not some external thing. Humans aren't part of it. God's some kind of external force that oversees it. No, very much intimately part of creation. Of course, the incarnation is a great example of that. And this idea of creation is a gift and we are the gardeners, right? We plant, but it's God ultimately that nourishes it. And you as catechetical leaders know this, right? Sometimes the best we can do is just plant those seeds and say, "Holy Spirit, it's up to you now. We can't do anymore. We've done what we could." And I think to have the humility to know that God wants conversion more than you do of those people in your life or those people in your parishes. That you do what you can and you witness how you can, but ultimately leave it to God to do the nourishing. And a beautiful quote from Isaiah: "Yet just as from the heavens the rain and snow come down and do not return there until they have watered the earth, making it fertile and fruitful, giving seed to the one who sows and bread to the one who eats." Our life as Catholics is so rich with creation, right? The tangible, the physical, the sights, the smells, right? The humbleness of bread and wine becoming the body and blood of Christ. There's just so much richness to how we as Catholics understand the created world. And I really like this analogy of greenhouses. And if any of you do any gardening, especially have ever worked in a greenhouse, we know it's kind of this sheltered environment where things can take root and grow very well without competition from weeds, without having to deal with the elements as much. But for us, as people of faith and as the people you work with, there's a time for us to be in that greenhouse, to be really fostered and in a safe place to grow in our faith and take root. But God doesn't keep us there. God doesn't want us to stay in the greenhouse, right? He wants us to move out of there. Our end goal is to not stay just in our circle and not challenge ourselves with growth in the life of faith, or a challenge to more social justice and ecological justice, caring for the poor, caring for the environment. that we're called out, right? And I think many people who spend too much of their time in the greenhouse, so to speak, when they're brought outside, if you've ever done this with a plant that's been in a greenhouse for 3 months, I mean, the wind is going to batter it around. It's going to have a really hard time. We need to help the people in our parish move from the small group discussions, the retreats, the catechetical formation, and into the world to bring Christ to the world. That's where we need to bring ourselves. But we need to have that time of formation and that time of filling back up. And maybe just to continue real briefly with this theme of fruits and gardens, right? Giving the first fruits of our life as a way of life, right? So what are the fruits of your lives that you're bringing to your ministry? And how do you bring that passion that you have for your faith, that passion you have for the poor, that passion you have for the outdoors and the environment, whatever those gifts you have, how do you bring those to your parishioners? How do you bring those to your family? And I think food is a great way to kind of think about this. And that picture on the right of the refrigerator, I think not only represents a lot of American refrigerators, right? As we were talking about with kind of a cluttered life and consumption and such, but I think it represents our souls oftentimes, right? Where we don't have a place left for God. There's no room in the inn, so to speak, where God is an afterthought. The spending time with God is an afterthought. We fill our lives with so many things and we don't have time for church or for prayer. So be thinking about, what are the first fruits, the first thing that you're going to give to God, the best of what you have? What are you going to offer Christ and his church? So in our ministry at the Catholic Ecology Center, we have the great blessing of having an organic farm. And what a gift it is to use gardening as a way to draw people to both sustainability, but also their faith. The Catholic Ecology Center, maybe in its simplistic form, is like a nature center and a retreat center that have come together. And I always say we're the best kind of nature center because we have Jesus. And that's one part of the environmental science world and ecology that has been left out, right? The creator, Christ. So we're able to bring that in, but I think it's important, again, to see humans as part of that creation. So it's not, oh, creation over here, don't touch it, you'll mess it up. No, we're part of creation. So how can we steward it? How can we keep it? And I think gardening is a great way to do that. And hopefully you have the chance to garden. And if not, maybe you're able to buy your produce locally from gardeners. We have an organic farm on site called Clare Gardens, beautiful connection with St. Clare, of course, and St. Francis of Assisi. And they grow vegetables, organic vegetables on the property. In 2022, they had 25,000 pounds of vegetable produce, organic produce that they grew, and that then goes to the different senior living homes in Milwaukee. So the nursing homes that in essence buy these food shares, large scale, that feed the kitchens. So instead of, if you've ever been in a CSA, a community supported agriculture, where you receive like a small box of produce once a week from a farmer, or go to a farmer's market, it's in essence like that, but large scale, corporate scale. What a beautiful ministry. And the people that receive that food, especially the elderly, are able to come and visit the farm where their food comes from. Very, very cool to see. And then, of course, the youth and the families that take part in programming get to see the farm, get to see food grown sustainably, organically, get to learn where their food comes from. It's a really, really beautiful mission. And it was a partnership that we have with Milwaukee Catholic Home that was able to bring that gardening aspect, the organic farm, to the Catholic Ecology Center. And what a great way to connect with creation. And there's a quote from Aldo Leopold, again, the kind of father of ecology in the secular world. He talks about two spiritual dangers in not owning a farm. And I think this can be important for us as we understand environmentalism. Two spiritual dangers in not owning a farm. The first is that we assume our heat comes from the furnace. And the second is that we assume our food comes from the grocery store, right? we as Americans especially have become so disconnected with where this stuff comes from, right? The resources, the work, the energy that goes into these things. You can see a picture there of us making maple syrup. That was one of the events. There's some families at our maple syrup day at the Catholic Ecology Center. There's some of the gals working on the organic farm. And again, connecting people with where these things come from gives you a greater respect and a greater just gratitude, as opposed to this disconnect that we as Americans often have. So that's something maybe for you personally or in your parish, to find ways to better connect people to the human side of things, where these goods come from and the impact that has on people making them, but also where our food is coming from and the good choices we can make in that regard. Probably the best action, I do have some action items down there. The most impactful thing that you can probably do starting today is where your food is coming from, what you buy and what you choose not to buy, right? We're eating 3 times a day. We're voting with our dollars every time we purchase those items. So that's going to be the greatest impact you can have, whether you're buying organic or not, local or not. These things that have huge impacts on energy consumption and health of the soil and water pollution. We often don't think about it. We go to the store and we buy a fruit or a vegetable that traveled 6,000 miles to get to you, where you could purchase something more locally, and it'd have huge environmental implications. So some things for parishes. I've seen parishes in Wisconsin here that have what they call Laudato Si gardens, or they grow vegetables at the parish. And that can be a challenge. You need people that are committed to growing it. We have sometimes youth groups that will start these at parishes, and then, well, they're gone for the summer, and then who takes care of it, right? So it's not to say there aren't challenges, but it can be a really great ministry when it's done well, to connect people to that food, and then to be able to donate it to food pantries. Some of that Clare Gardens produce is able to go to individuals and to food pantries in need. What a beautiful ministry. So maybe having a partnership for some of that food, or just working at a food pantry, or donating your time in that way. Having some sort of garden exchange. Maybe you have food that parishioners are growing in their households, and they can bring that to the parish and share it with people. Or, showing your family, hey, some of these eggs that we're raising, or some of these, the produce we're raising, we're going to take it, the first fruits, so to speak, we're going to take that to the food pantry and make sure that they have good, healthy food to eat. So you could host a parish farmers market. There's parishes that have done that. So not only do you get to raise some money, right, but you get to bring in local produce, and maybe connecting it to this greater concept of sustainability. Here's a picture from our St. Francis feast day. Actually, is a Franciscan sister who came out, who had a petting zoo there as part of a big celebration. But how do we understand creation? So St. Augustine to the rescue again. Here's a beautiful little anecdote from him. It says, if an unskilled person enters the workshop of an artisan, and he sees in it many tools of which he doesn't understand the use, he may consider them unnecessary. And if he should fall into the fire or wound himself on a sharp-edged tool, he may even consider them hurtful. But the craftsman, knowing their use, laughs at his folly. And thus people presume to find fault with many things in the world through not seeing the reasons for their existence. Right? This is what, the late 300s, 400s, when St. Augustine is writing this. What a profound insight. Ecologically, how often we disregard things. And think of this even with our perception of human dignity, how often that we kind of dispose of those people when they're not useful to us anymore, or we don't understand that they're imbued with the dignity of God. So to apply those principles, right, two conservationists, the Leopold and John Muir, talk about keeping every cog in wheel when we tinker in nature, so it can function at its highest level, which ultimately supports humanity the best. And John Muir talks about picking out anything in nature, we find it connected to everything else. So again, these principles ecologically and spiritually definitely intertwine very, very well. So in your parishes, in your lives, in your families, when we talk about call to care for creation, we talk about Laudato Si, we talk about Laudate Diem, we often deal with opposition. This is an unpleasant reality that a lot of people have a hard time dealing with, and how do we make sense of it? And I think be charitable and be loving and really try to get to the root of where the misunderstanding is. But Pope Francis in Laudate Diem has this quote. He says, "Let us put an end to the irresponsible derision that would present this issue as something purely ecological, green, romantic, frequently subject to the ridicule by economic interests. Let us finally admit that it is a human and a social problem on any number of levels." So maybe I would encourage you to come at it from an angle of love for people, right? Because again, we need to understand who humans are. We need to have that adequate anthropology to understand ecology truly, as Pope John Paul II mentioned. So come at it from that angle when people are really having a hard time understanding what this has to do with our life of faith. Why are we caring about something like this? Isn't this just a radical left ideology? And no, we can bring it into the lens of our faith and how it affects people as well as the planet. So some action items there, right? Thinking how your parish could catechize about this, both through the youth programs, but adult formation. Try to foster this idea of integral ecology, right? That the social justice of it, the environmental justice, this all goes together as the package of our faith. Maybe this is doing a small group study. It might be on Laudato Si or Laudate Diem. It might be just more generally within kind of how does social justice fit in the realm of faith, or ecological justice. This could be presentations. You're well equipped to do this presentation at your parish and to talk about these things and be honest about what you don't know, and showcase your passion to know more and to want to share this with others. This might be a retreat that you can do with parishioners. So just some action ideas for you and your parishes and your work. Pope Francis talks about approaching nature and the environment without openness to awe and wonder. Then our attitude will be that of masters, consumers, and ruthless exploiters. I think where I start with people is always drawing them to an awe and wonder for creation and ultimately to God through that creation. And that's such a natural connection for people to make, but we need to be intentional about making that connection. So no better way than to showcase the amazing ecology that's out there. Here in the Midwest and throughout much of the country, we recognize monarch butterflies. Sorry, those of you who are in Hawaii maybe don't know much about monarchs, but they're amazing, right? They're kind of the umbrella species, the poster child for planting native plants. But something amazing about their ecology, right? This is from a monarch tagging program that we do, where we catch these monarchs that are migrating from Wisconsin and Canada all the way to Mexico. And we put these small little tags on them that the scientists in Mexico can find them, or if they are caught along the way, we can track their movements. And there's people all over the country that do this Monarch Watch. And what an awesome thing to talk about. This insect, right, has never been to Mexico. It doesn't know how to go there. It's actually the 5th generation past the monarchs that were in Mexico prior. So it's not following a flock that's been there. How does it do that? It's amazing, right? And we can understand the science of it all. Sure, we can say it's instinct and we can look at how it's coded genetically, but ultimately, we're just humbled by this spectacle that is the monarch migration. So utilize that in your ministry, right? This awe and wonder for what is around us. Give you another example in the ecology world. Here on the left is a wonderful flower, and that thing on the flower head there is actually a camouflage looper caterpillar that takes bits of the flower that it's sitting on and glues it to itself to better camouflage itself, and it becomes the emerald line moth, or wavy lined emerald moth there on the right. What a cool thing, right? These aspects of paying attention to small details can really open up that awe and that wonder. Here's a frog that we get in the Midwest called the wood frog. And what's so spectacular about this otherwise kind of drab looking frog is what happens in these coming months in the Midwest. It freezes solid, right? So its heart stops, its body freezes, its body turns off. And then in the spring, as it melts, it's able to jumpstart again. Sure, there's a lot of really cool physiological science happening, but ultimately, wow, isn't that cool, right? Openness to awe and wonder. And I think if you have the privilege of being in an area where you can see the stars, another great avenue. A priest friend once said to me, the reason we have atheists is because we have streetlights. And initially I had no idea what he was talking about. But later, as he explained it, he said, no, think about it, right? If you can't see the stars, if you can't look up and ponder the cosmos and be humbled by the immensity of the cosmos, and that we are so infinitely small, yet God knows us by name and loves us intimately, even though there's so much vastness out there. If you're not able to contemplate that, it's easy to fall into a godless world or a worshiping of yourself. So how do we do this? We need to create space for quiet in our parishes, in our lives. Obviously, Mass is the culmination of that, but outside of Mass, right? That God speaks to us in the quiet. And creation, the outdoors, gives us this beautiful place to do this. So in our retreats, we are often utilizing quiet and journaling, right? You might think it's crazy to have third graders sit down and journal. No, it's wonderful. Do it. We all need it. Us adults need it probably more than the third graders need it. But listening to what's around you, how do we ever expect people to hear, whether adults or children, how do we expect them to hear God's voice if there's always noise happening? We always have an earbud in. So think about retreat experiences at your parish that can foster quiet reflection, especially in creation, or taking a retreat somewhere. Heck, fly out to the Catholic Ecology Center. No, but wherever that is locally for you, enjoying that time of meditation. It's uncomfortable at first. And our life of prayer, we need to build it. We can't all of a sudden sit quiet for an hour, but build that up and you'll be rewarded richly as your faith grows. So one of the things we love to do with groups is service projects, right? Young people of all ages, but especially young people, want to do something meaningful. Don't we all? And service projects, ecological service projects can be a way that happens. So whether it's tree planting, whether it's doing property maintenance, right? We have 60 acres as part of a 225 acre preserve. We manage miles of hiking trails and all kinds of stuff going on. There's always something to do for groups. Give them something meaningful to do. So this might be something ecologically that you do near you. It might be that you do service projects that, Habitat for Humanity and that sort of thing. Do something physical that serves a greater good beyond yourself and provide those opportunities for your parishioners. So those service projects. And then being an ecologist, obviously I have a heart for knowing what's there. And again, opening our eyes to the awe and wonder. So we do a lot of wildlife monitoring and ecology programs. So, whether it's tracking turtles or frogs or water quality monitoring or looking for snakes and birds or whatever it is, all these ways that we can, it's not directly faith related, right? But it gives an awe and wonder for what's around us that can feed this greater appreciation for creation. And then we'll want to steward it because we have a love for it. And one of the ways, maybe tangibly, most recently, the Catholic Ecology Center is trying to put our action or put our preaching into action is with our building edition. So we were able to purchase a Girl Scout camp in 2021 and really launch the Catholic Ecology Center. And the property has amazing facilities, but we wanted spaces that can better speak to our mission as well. And as we grow, we are in the midst right now of building a 3,500 square foot building addition. And we want it to be authentic. We want it to show the riches of our faith with items we're able to reclaim from churches that unfortunately have closed. So stained glass windows that those of you out in Connecticut, we were able to get stained glass windows from a church out in Connecticut. We're able to get statuary from a convent that closed in Pennsylvania. We're able to get all these different element pews, things that are reclaimed, but show the richness of our faith, but also doing that through sustainability. We're showcasing, solar power, geothermal heating and cooling, a green roof to absorb water for water conservation, a gray water recycling system that takes the water that's coming from the sinks and the bubbler that otherwise would be wasted and is using it for irrigation of a pollinator garden. All these ways that we kind of speak to this mission that we as Catholics have a richness to our faith that we need to bring back, and we need to do that sustainably. So that's been a challenge, right? Because that's a big investment, and those are things that can be challenging to do at a parish or at an archdiocese or a diocese, but to really say that we're called to do more, we're called to represent that and hold out a big cup, right? And if it's God's will, he'll bring those people forward. So how does this play out at your parish? There's parishes I know of, both Catholic and Protestant, that are doing parish energy audits, right? There's a lot of Protestant parishes that are using Laudato Si as a guide of action. So doing an energy audit to see where your parish can save energy. Is it investing in better windows, in a better furnace, right? We have some old infrastructure. Our existing building that the Catholic Ecology Center was built in 1970, right? And we're upgrading that propane system to a geothermal heating and cooling, and looking at the costs and benefits of that. Recycling and waste, that's a big one for parishes, right? How do we make sure we don't fall into that disposable mindset where we're, for our donut sundae, just using 300 styrofoam cups and throwing them away? How do we say, no, we have a perfectly good kitchen, and guess what? We're going to do dishes afterwards, and we're going to use actual mugs and plates. It's I think most newer parishes have a kitchen and have all the plates and cups that they need, but instead they buy disposable. So, and it can be a challenge. It can be an uphill stream swim for you when you're dealing with these things at the parish level, but it's worth bringing it to the consciousness of those around you. How do you use your grounds? Some of the most amazing properties are owned by Catholic churches, and yet we just mow and mow and mow and mow. It's all lawn, right? How do we better plant it with natives and do something that'll bring beauty beyond just lawn? And lawns have their purpose, but being able to say, okay, we got this 5-acre parcel for our parish, let's do something better with it. Let's focus on sustainability as well. Water conservation at your parish, especially some of you in the arid states, this can really benefit your water situation in the state you live in, but also speak to how people of faith are serious about this. So I think one of the things that might be worth a few minutes is to just give some time for you to break out in groups, and John will situate you in a minute here, but some points of maybe discussion for you. And I'm sure I just scratched the surface on these things, and I'm sure you have more questions now than you got answers from me. But some things for you to reflect on with your breakout group is just, what are some things that stood out to you from these presentations? Presentation 1 or presentation 2. I mean, some of the comments were amazing that were coming through the chat. So I want to give you an opportunity to discuss those with others. Is there something that you're struggling with to understand about these topics? Questions that you have that maybe you can pose to the group, and not just to me, not that I have the answers. There's a lot of people here that have great insight. So what's the context of your parish or ministry? So maybe you can share that with your group, right? How can the message of Laudato Si or Laudate Deum take root? How are you doing it? What is the situation you're in at your parish? And maybe what are some ideas or strategies that have worked for you with applying this idea of integral ecology, or even very tangible, practical things that you've tried that have worked? So I'll let John kind of break us into some groups here for a few minutes, and I'll let him.
All yours, Joe.
Well, hopefully that discussion was fruitful for you. Just maybe a few closing thoughts. First of all, for any of you, I was kind of reading some of the chats and such. You all have such wonderful ideas And thank you for the kind words from some of you. Feel free to peruse the Catholic Ecology Center website, see what we're doing, get some ideas of how to bring that home. Yeah, check it out. You can get a hold of me through the website there. Happy to discuss more some of the stuff with you. But I think as I was talking in my breakout room, maybe just my final thought here is, you know, as I began, I talked about God doesn't call the qualified, he qualifies the called. And I think don't worry about being perfect. Don't worry about having it all figured out in your faith before you do something. God's calling us to be saints. He gives us the grace to do that, and do it with who you are, who God created you to be. And don't be afraid. Don't think you need some theology degree or some science degree or whatever it is. We often scare ourselves out of doing something more for God, but it's such a rewarding thing to just jump in with both feet and let the Holy Spirit lead the way. It's a wild ride. So I would invite all of you, whatever that call is in your life, whatever that is that God's calling you to and kind of tugging at your heart, don't be afraid to discern and pray for that guidance and to follow the Holy Spirit wherever that might lead. So I want to thank all of you for joining me today, spending time your Wednesday afternoon to do that, and look forward to hearing from some of you. God bless you.
Joe, on behalf of NCCL and all the participants, thank you so much. A reminder, the video will be online at NCCL Catholic next week on Monday, and links to the Catholic Ecology Center and some of the resources Joe's mentioned. Joe, we really appreciate it. This was just terrific. Thank you so much.
All right. Thanks, John.
Well, everybody, have a great week.
Take care.